of course, post. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our Torah class. And this week's Torah portion is called Shelach. Let's bring everybody up to speed. If you weren't here last week we discussed a very, very touching, emotional story of what happens to Miriam when she talks about her brother Moshe. She gets Torah, which is a form of leprosy. And what was beautiful is the entire nation of Israel, who are camped in the desert, few million people, all wait 7 days for Miriam to be healed so that she doesn't have to travel with them while she has psoras, a skin disease, and be in pain. And what I forgot to mention last week that I want to conclude with and then start the new power portion is, why did she merit that the whole nation, few million people, waited for her so that she could be healed before they travel, so she doesn't have to travel in pain and take longer to heal? Is because if you recall the story that we discussed last week, how her younger baby brother Moshe was put into the Nile Delta River because they wanted to save him from the police, Paro's Egyptian police, who were killing the baby boys. She stood there waiting and watching. And when he was taken out by the daughter of Paro, and he was crying in pain, he was starving, and they tried to feed him with non-kosher formula, non-kosher nursemaids, she said, "Let me bring you a Jewish nursemaid," because she knew her brother would not eat from a non-kosher nursemaid. He was a special soul. And she ran and brought her mother, and she alleviated his pain and suffering from hunger and didn't allow him to suffer unnecessarily. God remembered that. And she was 6 years old at the time. She's now 86 years old. 80 years later, God, in a sense, rewards her and doesn't allow her to have to travel while she has the skin disease of leprosy. And why she had it, we discussed last week. But this is just a beautiful insight to show you, you never know the good things you do in your life. And 80 years later, something comes around and gives you the reward or the, what would you say, positive impact that you had. You sometimes wonder, I did this good thing, will I ever be rewarded? What did I get out of it? What did I get out of it? The other person benefited, but what did I get out of it? You never know, even 80 years later, what goes around comes around. My husband always tells me, and I'm saying this in a positive way. You sometimes wonder. So if you ever wonder, no good deed goes unpunished. No good deed goes unrewarded. So this is the beautiful insight with Miriam. Now we come to a very tragic Torah portion, one of the greatest tragedies in the 5 books of the Torah. Anybody remember what it is? Anybody want to share? It has to do with spies going into the land of Israel. Anybody remember? Don't worry, I'll refresh your memory. So now we come to the Torah portion called Shelach, send. Moshe sends spies to scout out the land of Israel, right? They left Egypt. Now they have to come and settle the land. God said, you're going to the land of Israel, you're going to settle the land. So you don't just enter a country. There are nations living there who are not going to take kindly to 6 million people coming to the borders. Remember, this is not the United States that has open borders. So they need to send scouts. So soon we'll see what the connection is between the story of Miriam and the story of the spies, the scouts. Now, this was not God's idea. In the previous portion, the Jewish people come to Moshe, they go, we're about to enter the land, right? You're just going to walk in there? They'd say to Moshe, we're not going to scout out the land. We're not going to send spies. We're not going to prepare war, how to fight, where to fight, which border is weaker, which side to enter. What, we're just going to go? So Moshe doesn't do anything without God. So Moshe approaches God and says to God, the Jewish people approach me. They want to send out spies. So remember, this was not God's idea. This was the people's idea. It's very interesting how in the Torah portions we see so much is initiated by the Jewish people or by people. And God is not arrogant and say, get out of here. Stop giving me your ideas. We have free choice. And you see it throughout the Torah portions, even to our own detriment, which you'll soon see to our own detriment. God says, okay, to Moshe, you want to send spies? Go ahead. But look how God says it. And there's something here so fantastic that I love. Listen what happens. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemar. And God spoke to Moshe saying, Shelach lecha anashim. Send for yourself men and have them scout out the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to the Jewish people. Now listen to the the language. Send for yourself. Yourself. I didn't ask you to do it. It's you want it. You don't say to Diane, send for yourself flowers. Send for yourself shopping. You say, send someone to go shopping. Send someone to scout out the land. God says, send for yourself. You wanted it, you send. For yourself, because I don't need scouts. I know how to conquer the land for my people. And then Rashi jumps in and says, why does it say Anashim? Men. Why the detail? And we know the Torah doesn't include details unless it's necessary. So God says to Moshe, the commentaries tell us, I would send frankly women. If I send the women to be scouts and spies, you can know you're going to come back. It's going to be exactly the way it was meant to be. They're going to come back. They're going to give you a report, and we're going to see how to conquer the land. But you want to send men, send men. And that's why the Torah says, had Moshe sent women to be the spies, it would have been a whole different story. Now, how do we know? Look at the past history. The women refused to listen to their husbands in Egypt. The husband said, listen, let's practice birth control. We can't have any more children in this terrible country that's persecuting us and enslaving us. What did the women do? Remember, they beautified themselves. Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. It says they went under the apple trees. They took those copper mirrors. They beautified themselves, and they were intimate with their husbands, and they gave birth to many children. They didn't listen. Then it came the time, the crossing after the Red Sea. They took out the tambourines and they danced. And we discussed who schleps a tambourine when you're an immigrant. You take Mama Silver, you take Bubby's candlesticks, you take your gold, you take your money, you take your clothing, you take your children's toys. Who takes tambourines when you're running away from a country? Buy a tambourine in the next in the instrument store. The women carried tambourines in the desert because they knew there would be a time that they're going to want to celebrate. They anticipated bringing the bottle of champagne. You know, you schlep out the bottle of champagne that you have because you knew one day there'll be a special occasion. So throughout the history, they don't participate in the sin of the golden calf. Remember, the husbands say, okay, everybody, pass over your jewelry. We need to make a golden calf. We need a god. We need a representative. And the women go, what? I'm not giving my jewelry for a golden calf, for idolatry. So time and time again, the women showed leadership in faith. So God says, if you would send women, it would be a much better idea. But Moshe sends the men. Now, he doesn't send any men. It's not like he took men who were uneducated, rabble rousers, troublemakers, nudniks. He took the cream of the crop. The Torah describes he took the prince of every tribe. 12 scouts, 12 spies, one from every tribe, the cream of the crop, intellectuals, the leaders, the princes of every tribe. So now you have 12 sophisticated, articulate, intelligent men chosen to be the spies. And amongst them, from the tribe of Yehuda was Kalev, and you'll see why I'm mentioning it. And the second one was Judah, from the Kalev from the tribe of Yehuda, the tribe of Judah, and Hoshea, Yehoshua, who we know. Who's Yehoshua? Who remembers? Who's Yehoshua in the story? Joshua. He's going to be the next leader of the Jewish people. As we learned in remember the previous Torah portion, the prophets prophesied that Joshua is going to inherit the leadership when Moshe dies in the desert. So Joshua and Caleb are also among the 12 spies. Now they go into the land of Israel. Let's tell the story and then we'll analyze. And we're going to analyze the story on 3 levels. The literal level, deeper insight, and then we're going to analyze it from the perspective of Kabbalah and Hasidus, which is Jewish mysticism, because this is no simple story. And it's important to know who the spies were, because sometimes you say, of course they came back like that. Look who you sent. You know, look who you sent to buy a dress. Of course they came back with a dress that looks like it's Bubby's antique. You need to send someone who's fashion conscious if you want to go shopping. Moshe sent the cream of the crop to scout out the land. He didn't send just plain folk like me. He sent the cream of the crop. So listen what happens. So they go scout out the land. And I want to read it because it's very beautiful, also very telling. Let's get my notes. Okay. This is what they say. Okay. They come back. They're there for 40 days. 40 days they're there. I want to read the dates because the dates are also extremely, extremely important. Let me just get this quickly. Problem is when you have too many notes, it's a problem. Let me go get my notes. You know how I am with dates. I can't remember dates for the life of me, so I write it down. Here it is. Okay. So let me quickly just look at this. Sorry. Bear with me for one more second. The dates are very important, and you'll see why. Give me a second. Hold on. Okay. They went, then they come, and they went. Okay. This is also very important. Okay, here we go. Oh, here it is. So they went on the 29th day of Sivan. They stayed and scouted out the land for 40 days. They came back on the 8th day of Av, and they came back with such a negative report that on the 9th day of Av, the Jewish people were weeping and crying. How could you let us die now at the final moment before we enter the land of Israel? We're going to be killed by the inhabitants. We're going to be swallowed up. And they cried and cried and cried. So the date is very important, but who remembers what happens in the 9th of Av in future generations? The 9th of Av.
The destruction of the temples.
Exactly. Tisha B'Av, the saddest day in Jewish history, all began with this encounter of the spies coming back with a negative report about Israel. And I want to read what happened so you'll understand why it was so negative. So 9th of Av, the 9th day of Av, when the Jewish people were weeping, sobbing, crying, God, how could you do this to us? We're going to perish now after all this? And God said, you're crying now. Good morning, Margaret. You're crying now? I'm going to give you something to cry about in the future. You're crying about this? Wait, you're going to have what to cry about. And the 9th of Av became now indented in our history as the saddest day in our lives. The first temple, as Joel said, the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed on the 9th of Av. The second Beit HaMikdash was destroyed on 9th of Av. Many expulsions, persecutions. I think World War I began on Tisha B'Av. Happened on Tisha B'Av. I have a whole list. I'll bring it next time. Terrible tragedies happened on Tisha B'Av. If you look in the history, terrible, terrible world tragedies and Jewish tragedies happened on Tisha B'Av. But when Mashiach comes, by the way, Tisha B'Av will become a Jewish holiday, a day of celebration. Everything will be cleaned around. But it all began this day. Sometimes you weep. You know, a child cries because the mother doesn't want to give them dessert, or they can't have another piece of cake, honey, enough sugar, and the child is weeping. You'd say to yourself, that's what they're crying about. There's so many terrible things to cry about. The Jewish people are weeping because they're worried they can't get into the land of Israel. Now, listen, I want to tell you, read what happens, okay? Because it's very, very important. I want to read the story, okay? We came to the land. Now they're back and they're giving a report. We came to the land which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. And they show these giant fruits, the grapes the size of your nightstand, and fruits and vegetables that are planted by giants. Even the fruits are giants. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. This is the clincher. We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than he. The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people we saw are of great height, giants, and we seemed, this is very important, to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seem to them. So basically, they're saying, listen, God cannot capture the land for us. Now, this is ludicrous. Go, ladies and gents, look what just happened a few months ago. They left Egypt, 10 plagues, splitting of the Red Sea, Amalek attacked, they were destroyed. Anybody who tried to attack the Jews in the desert were annihilated by God. This pillar of fire, the cloud of glory, manna from heaven, water from a rock that has nothing attached to it, Miriam's rock, Miriam's well.
What?
They didn't have to wash their clothes. They didn't have to do a thing. Miracles upon miracles. They woke up with miracles and went to sleep with miracles. They got the Torah at Sinai. They heard God's voice, thunder, lightning. It is insane to believe that they begin weeping and the Meraglim, the spies, say God can't capture the land for us? What? What's the big deal? This is already nothing compared to what God did in the past. How could they have so lack of faith? And another question you want to ask is, Moshe sends them to scout out the land, right? And they come back and they tell the truth. There's giants. There's even giant fruit. So why are they later punished because they told the truth? That's another question. Now, the other side of the coin. Can you fault them for telling the truth? So we're not faulting them for telling the truth. We're faulting them for the line where they say, what do they say, everybody? That God can't, we are not able to go up against the people for they are stronger than God. Really? Stronger than God? So what happened over here? What went wrong in the whole story? Anybody have any ideas, any suggestions?
They're not very grateful. They're blaming God.
Right, okay. Maybe people have short memories. So first of all, there's a whole psychological, emotional thing going on here, if you like psychology. Did you ever hear of the book Mindset from Carol Dweck? So let's start with something very simple. I mean, I think it's pretty simple. There's two kinds of mindset. One is called a fixed mindset, and one is called a growth mindset. So in this book, Mindset, which is a very interesting book if you want to read it, she did an experiment. 10-year-old kids, she gave them puzzles that were way above their level. One group of kids, the minute they saw it was difficult, these puzzles, they dropped the puzzles and off they went. They refused to finish and try to finish these puzzles. It's too hard. Goodbye. The second group of kids, the minute they saw, hi Margaret, the minute they saw puzzles were difficult, they worked and worked until they got the puzzles, even though they knew that the puzzles were way too difficult for them. So the question is, why do some people encounter a challenge and they give up? And some people, they encounter a challenge and they work to overcome the challenge. So she explains this fixed mindsets, which were the spies, and growth mindsets. And it's how we raise our children and even how we look at ourselves. A fixed mindset is usually people like the princes of the tribes, wealthy, articulate, affluent, fear of failure. Like Roosevelt said, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. It's called the psychology of fear. Your fear of failure does not allow you to finish or or challenge yourself or conquer something because you're scared of failure. They were princes. They were scared of failing. So to protect themselves, they said, listen, we can't do it. And they back off. So they have the fixed mindset. And that's when parents will always tell the children, you're so smart. You're so intelligent. You're so gifted. You're so perfect. Those children fail more often because they're scared. They don't encounter challenges they don't want to take on because they're scared. What is my mother going to say if I fail? So I'd rather not do it. I'm not going to finish the puzzle. I'll just step away. But those children that the parents say to them, listen, you have a tough game ahead of you. The team that's going to play you is tough. But put in your best effort. I know you could do it. Put in your best effort. Then that person's not afraid of failure. You know why? Because they know that all they have to do is put in their best effort. They're not going to be looked on with disdain if they didn't succeed. They're going to be looked upon, did you try? So fear of failure causes us to fail. Willingness to fail causes us to succeed. It's counterintuitive, but that's how it works. Again, fear of failure causes us to fail. You're so scared of failing, you're not going to take this on. But willing to fail causes us to succeed. You say, listen, maybe I'll fail, but I'm going to try to win this game. Maybe I'll fail, but I'm going to conquer this land because God said so. So the princes of Israel were so feared of failure because we are the princes. How will we look if we fail? Let's not take this on. It's too difficult to conquer the land. That's called the psychology of fear. They were scared to fail. And when you're scared to fail, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Tell yourself you're going to fail your algebra, you'll fail, not because you're not intelligent, not because you don't have the answers, because in your mind, you told yourself you can't pass the test. Sometimes it's what you tell yourself is why you don't succeed. It's not because you can't succeed. It's not because you can't do it. And it's not because you don't have the answers. You have told yourself, I am not going to pass this test. I know I'm not going to pass this test. And that's why you don't pass the test. The spies decided we can't do this. We can't do it. And they didn't. Because what was the punishment? God said, this generation is now going to have to travel another 40 years in the desert. And they traveled another 40 years. The generation that left Egypt, except for the women and the men, okay, the generation who left Egypt, all the men and boys above the age of 13 perished in the desert. And the women, who of course lived longer, and the younger boys and the new generation went into the land of Israel. So no one who left Egypt really from the men and the boys over the age of 13 survived the 40 years in the desert. It was a terrible tragedy. And also you have to also point out, as one of the women said last week, the slave mentality. That you can take the slave out of Egypt, but can you take slavery out of the person? The slave mentality held them back. We see it on and on again. It was the next generation who did not experience slavery in Egypt that enters in the land of Israel because their mentality was different. They were born in the desert, they were born in freedom. It's a very, very, very important thing to realize how slavery impacts people, how persecution impacts people. It's yeah, we read the stories in the Torah and we don't realize that there's a psychological insight here. There's an emotional insight. There's a lot happening here. Because you might say, if I was there, I would have not listened to them. I wonder sometimes, you know? How do you call it when everybody, the group, or the horde mentality? How do you call it when everybody does it because everybody's doing it?
Mob mentality.
The mob mentality. So listen, let me ask you, Diane, tell me what you think. If you're a woman, so you must probably be with the women. If you were there at the time, how would you feel about the situation? Tell me what you think. Don't be embarrassed if you think.
I think I wouldn't take no for an answer. I would resist and persevere.
Yeah. What about you, Margaret?
You mean if you were one of the people who went over to and confronted the giants?
Or if you were one of the crowd, they came back and they all said, listen, there's giants. Look at the massive fruit as proof. I think, guys, we should stay here for a while.
Well, let's figure out another strategy.
Very good. I see the women are women no matter which generation. Ladies, what about you, Joelle? Would you be part of the crowd? Would you fight? What would you do?
I think I would have been torn because I would have trusted what the spies saw. They saw what they saw. I didn't see it. So I would have been inclined to trust their judgment, but then I would have questioned what we were doing there in the first place. If God took us out of Egypt to take us to the land of Israel, and that's what we were doing, then that's what we were doing.
Very good.
So I would have been torn, I think, but ultimately it seems useless to go all that way and then just say, no, it's a little too scary when we know he just got us out of a scary situation as well.
Exactly. But I want to tell you now, remember I said we're going to take off layers and layers like an onion? Now you know why you need Hasidus, Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah. Because somehow I find this whole answer very unsatisfying. Because they were the princes of the tribes, right? Really? They really said God can't take us? Come on. Really? Did they really believe that? Sometimes you say something, but you say, you know what? I didn't really mean it. Did they really mean that? By the way, that's why some people, they cannot leave, which we said, they can't leave Gulut, they can't leave exile because they don't believe in redemption. You cannot leave your prison if you don't believe in freedom. That's what we discussed, the slave mentality. That's just a little line. So now let's dig even deeper. I would call this now self-sabotage. Hasidus, Jewish mysticism based on Kabbalah, like we tell. I just want to refresh what Kabbalah is. So Kabbalah is the esoteric secrets of the Torah, the oral tradition, part of the oral tradition. But Kabbalah is very esoteric. It's very mystical. Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, takes Kabbalah, takes the secrets of the Torah, and shows us how to apply this esoteric knowledge to our daily lives. Because otherwise, you sit and study Kabbalah, you might be a great Kabbalist. But are you going to be a great person, a great Jew? Right? So Hasidus enhances your life by taking the esoteric secrets of Torah and saying, listen, this is how it applies to you, to your life. Otherwise, Kabbalah is a great asset, but how does it change you? Because Torah is not about knowledge only. It's great to know things. I'm glad you know how to dissect an insect and you know all the 151 names, but how does this impact your life? How does this make you a better person? How does it make you better in your relationships? How does it make you better in viewing the world? How does it make you better dealing with your emotions, with your challenges? That's what Hasidus is. That's what it does. That's the beauty and the strength of it. So now we're going to analyze this deeper. Hasidus explains this was self-sabotage. They knew God could take them into the land, but they came forth with a terrible, terrible mental insight. What did they say? We're now going to enter into the land of Israel, and we are going to jeopardize our relationship with God. That's why they write, the land consumes its inhabitants. What does it mean it consumes its inhabitants? It swallows up its inhabitants. There's a swamp, you go in, boom, you disappear like in the movies. It will consume its inhabitants. A whole year as we traveled in the desert with God, right there. Our little tabernacle. Every day Moses has conversations with God. We have the 70 elders, manna from heaven, water from a rock. Our clothing is laundered. Sitting and studying Torah, everything provided for us. Holiness, spirituality. You wake up in the morning, wow. You see God's cloud of glory at night. There's a pillar of flames. You're living in Camelot. Why do we want to go in the land of Israel? Really, God? Why would we want to go there? We're going to go there. What's going to happen? We're going to have to set up police stations, courts of law, schools. We're going to have to set up industry, business, agriculture, build homes, right? We're going to have to live a real life. Plant and sow and buy and sell, set up the stock market, S&P 500.
No more welfare. Yeah.
No
Right.
more, no more food stamps, Margaret. And Judaism will be on the back burner. Who's going to have time to study Torah? Who's going to have time to do mitzvahs when all day long we're going to be consumed with running our lives? Materialism. Why go into the land of Israel? They couldn't understand. Who needs it? So that's not that they didn't think God could save them. Of course they knew. But this is their way of misunderstanding their mission and purpose in life. God gave the Torah in the desert. Why? Why in the desert? Who gives the Torah, the most valuable asset in the universe, on the desert? On a mountain. Give it in a garden. Give it by a magnificent ocean. Give it in a beautiful scenery. You get married in the desert with no backdrop for the photographer. You have a Torah in the desert. Why? Who remembers? Who has an insight? Because this is the fundamental purpose of you and me living on this earth. To take a desert, to take a barren piece of land and imbue it with holiness, godliness, light, spirituality, goodness, kindness. That's why God gave us the Torah. Take this landscape, take this empty canvas, and create a tapestry of beauty. God said to the Jewish people, your purpose is not to sit in the desert with me and I'll spoon feed you everything. Your purpose is to go into a land, live a normal materialistic life. Yes, you have to plant, you have to sow, you have to invest, you have to get a job, you have to get an education, you have to have courts of law, you have to have policemen and firemen, and dig wells for water, and put up electricity for cell phones and everything. And take those material moments in your lives and imbue it with godliness, holiness, and spirituality. Your mission is to meld heaven and earth. Your mission is not to sit up in the heavens on a cloud and float around with the angels and go, oh my gosh, God, you're so holy. Let's study another kapitel Torah. Let's study another portion of your job is, yes, while you're doing laundry, while you're diapering your baby, while you're trading stocks, while you're buying and selling, you are living a life of Judaism, of holiness, of Torah and mitzvahs. If God wanted you to be in the desert, you'd stayed in the desert. So they misunderstood the whole purpose of Torah and mitzvahs, the whole mission of why a soul comes down to earth in a body. If God wanted souls, he wouldn't have put us into bodies. Bodies are hungry. Bodies want to have Botox. Bodies want to look beautiful. Bodies want to sleep. We want to eat. We want to have fun. We live in a materialistic world. But our mission is to imbue that materialism with goodness and kindness and mitzvahs and God's light. That's our mission, to plant, to sow, to reap in this very materialistic physical world. And when a person who's digging a hole to plant a seed, or selling a stock and buying a stock, and then gives tzedakah, or opens up their home on Shabbos for guests, or meets another person and extends to them a kind word, that is, you're fulfilling your mission on earth. You're fulfilling a mission on earth because you're imbuing, your whole life is woven with different threads, godly threads, holy threads, and also, yes, the mundane things in life. And the Meraglim, the spies, misunderstood why they were put on earth, why they were going into the land of Israel. And that's why they self-sabotaged. You know, people self-sabotage sometimes. They're scared of success. Self-sabotage because they said, we will lose our connection to God. We won't have that special relationship. Does anybody want to have anything to say? Because it's a little bit heavy stuff. I apologize.
I don't apologize. I feel like they were a little bit immature. They didn't want to grow up and get a real job, you know?
Yeah, you know how they say the newest trend is that the college kids are graduating and instead of getting jobs, they're moving back to mommy and tati. And the parents don't like it. The parents say, why did I pay for education? You're back home. You saw that insurance commercial? It's brilliant. There's an insurance commercial wherever you go, they say. So the parents are sitting on the couch watching a show together, an elderly couple, and their grown son moves back in. And they're cuddling together. And he says to them, excuse me, didn't we discuss that roommates, no romance among roommates? He tells his parents, no romance. It's so well done, whoever came up with that scheme. And then they talk about insurance, which, what does it have to do with it? But it's brilliant. The psychology of it, you know?
There's some movie, I can't remember what movie now, but
Yeah.
Michael and I have this running joke when he's home. The adult son moves back in and he screams from the other room, Mom, get me meatloaf. So whenever we want to joke with each other, he would go, Mom, the meatloaf. And he's like 30 years old and he's living at home. So,
Yeah. You know, I love when my kids move in on me. I get so excited. I love it. I just love when my kids come home. Like people say, you like it when the kids are home? And I'm like, I love it. I'm so lonely when they're not home. I love when they all pile in on my head and drive me crazy. I love it. And they're
yeah,
going to be doing it in the next few weeks. It's great. I love it. Okay.
I love it both ways. I love it when they come and then they drive me crazy. And then I feel it's sour grapes and then I miss them and then they come back. And
You know, my kids, then they like to come home too. They like to be nurtured even when they're married. You know, you like nurturing. Nurturing is a very, very important thing. Uh, Lastly, I want to share one more beautiful insight, also based on Hasidic Jewish mysticism. This is my favorite of all. Remember the earlier story last week we discussed that Moshe cried out to God, you know, I can't do it anymore. I can't lead the people. They complain and they kvetch. It's very hard for me to do this. Take my life. Remember how he has almost a breakdown in leadership last week, right? And God says, Moshe, I'm giving you 70 elders who will be your assistants. They will be prophets. I'm going to give them prophecy, and they'll take off the burden of leadership. And Moshe is very happy. And among the 70 elders, there were two also younger prophets, Eldad and Medad. Suddenly, God gives these two young gentlemen prophecy. And they start prophesizing. What do they prophesize? This is before the story of the spies. This is in the last week's Torah portion. Remember, what do they prophesize? Who remembers? That Moshe is going to die soon. And Joshua, remember Joshua? Not Moshe's sons. Joshua is going to be the next leader. And he's going to take the Jewish people into into Israel. So Joshua comes running to Moshe. This is the story in last week's parsha. He says, Moshe, sentence these two prophets to death. They're prophesizing your demise. It's horrible, the chutzpah. So Moshe is very humble, and he knows it's true, and he says to Joshua, you're taking on my honor? You're defending me? No, thank you, I don't need. Okay? So now the whole nation knows that Moshe will not be entering into the land of Israel. And this is a very, very, very sad part of the story. Moshe does not end up going into the land of Israel. He begs, he cries, he screams, he prays, he does everything in his power to God to allow him to go into the land. And God says, no, you will not go into the land. And he dies in the desert, remember? And his burial place is hidden. And we'll talk about more in that Torah portion. To me, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Like you did it all, but you didn't get the prize. You didn't get the prize. So one insight is that Moshe is the captain of the ship. Remember, we said the punishment was that the Jews who left Egypt, the boys over the age of 13 and the men died out in the desert. So Moshe is their captain. If his nation doesn't go in, he doesn't go in. He stays with his people. They were buried in the desert, and Moshe gets buried in the desert. It's heartbreaking, but that's a leader. A leader sacrifices for his people. A captain stays with his ship. Now the spies knew this. They knew that the minute they start capturing the land, Moshe will die because of the prophecy. You can't fight with God's prophecy. They said, no, 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 no. We cannot enter the land. Entering the land means the passing of Moshe. Their love for Moshe was so great. They didn't care that they did the wrong thing. They said, our love for Moshe is so great. They said to themselves, we are not going into the land of Israel. We cannot leave our Moshe. Moshe sacrificed everything for us. He gave his life, his soul, his family, everything for us. We're going to go into the land of Israel and leave him behind because he can't enter with us? Because we know he can't. God said so. We are not entering. And their punishment was 40 years in the desert because of their love for Moshe. So you can fault them. They did the wrong thing because ultimately it's not what you want and your love. It's what God wants. So they did the wrong thing. The Jewish people were punished for this. But their motives were great. Their love of Moshe was so great. They loved their Rebbe. Moshe was their Rebbe, their leader, so much. They couldn't contemplate the thought of going into a land of milk and honey and leaving their Rebbe, their Moshe, their leader, their beloved leader behind. They couldn't fathom this, and because they couldn't fathom this, they sabotaged the whole project. They sabotaged the whole situation. So this tells us there's two types of love. I think it's important to know. There's a love that they had for Moshe, but they were still Moshe and they were the spies, separate entities. That's one form of love. Then there's a second form of love. Hasidus Kabbalah explains. It's a love that you're one with the person. You and the person are like one. So their love was very great. But at the end of the day, they were still not Moshe, and Moshe was not them because they didn't do what was meant to be done. It still was a little bit of a personal agenda. My love for you is so great, I can't fathom a life without you. I'm not going to the land of Israel. Even though that was my destiny, and even though that's what God said. The higher form of love is where you're one with the person or one with God. God said you're going into the land of Israel. You want to scout it out? That's fine. But you're going in. That's your destiny. That's your mission in life. Yes, there's consequences. There's challenges. Moshe will not be with you. Yes. But the will of God is to go into the land of Israel. So Moshe was one with God. He never could oppose God, even it's to own detriment. That's the highest form of love. That's the kind of love we attain where we're one with the person. Their will and my will is one. There's never a discrepancy here. So though the Meraglim had the greatest, highest intentions, and we love them for their intentions, could you fault them? Could you say to them, oh, they're so terrible? No. Wow. Look what they did for their love. But at the end of the day, their love was not one with Moshe, one with God, because they took their own path for their love. So you can't say selfish love, but from deep down, it does come from a love that benefits you. Whereas the highest form of love is there's no self-benefit. What's yours is mine and mine is yours. We're one. And it's hard to understand, but you got to think about it a little bit, you got to analyze it a little bit. But this is where they were fault. Love is great, but it's even greater when it's one with the other part of the equation. One with God, one with Moshe, and so on. So therein lied the fault. There's love, and then there's love. So though their love was powerful, unbelievable, and I read this, I'm like, wow. Their sacrifice for Moshe, their love was Moshe was so great, but at the end of the day, it was their love, theirs, and that was the problem, not one with God's. So that therein lied the final debacle of the Meraglim. But again, you read the story, in a way you feel bad. You don't look at the Meraglim, look at those terrible people. So this concludes the story of the Meraglim. And why is it connected to the story of Miriam, just quickly, and then we'll conclude, is because Miriam spoke about Moshe. She didn't mean it in a bad way. She wanted to help the relationship. Zipporah, she didn't want her sister-in-law to be alienated and maybe have more children. She meant well. Here, the Meraglim spoke Lashon Hara about the land of Israel. So two people spoke against, one about the land of Israel. You're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara even about the land, even though it's land, but it's Israel. It has a soul. And Miriam spoke, not bad, but spoke about Moshe. And you see, that's the connection, that you have to be so careful what you say and how you say it. I remember when my father passed away, we established a Gershon Jacobson Memorial Lecture because we didn't want to make like an annual dinner. We wanted to make a lecture because my father was a world-renowned journalist. He was an intellectual. And we knew he appreciated education and he appreciated intellectual stimulation. So every year we brought a speaker, a big, very well-renowned speaker. So the first speaker was Eli Wiesel, best friends with my father. He eulogized my father. It's interesting because in Chabad, there's no eulogies at the funeral. They save the eulogies for the 30 days. That's how they do it. But at my father's funeral in Brooklyn, Elie Wiesel came and he said to my older brother Simon, can I eulogize your father? So my brother came over we're 5 siblings. My brother came over to the rest of us and we quickly discussed it and we said, you know what? Yes. Because it's Elie Wiesel and he loved my father. My father loved him. We'll have him eulogize. And he said a beautiful eulogy. He said, my father, he needed advice. He always came to my father for advice. He says, my father gave him the best advice. And then on the first annual lecture, he was the guest speaker. And he said something that I still remember. He said, I never talk bad about the land of Israel. I never speak Lashon Hara about the land of Israel, he said, ever, because it's a land with a soul. It's like it's not a person, but it is a person. It has a soul. And I always thought about that. So, you know how we like to criticize Israel. Why don't they do this? Why don't they let the Arabs take over the land? Why don't they attack? You have to always talk about Israel with respect and love because it has a soul. It's our land. It's part of us. So the Meraglim spoke, their intentions were honorable, but they spoke negative about Eretz Yisrael. And Israel, the Jewish people, the Torah and God are one. You cannot separate. That's why when Zionism went into Israel, they said we're a country like every other country. They didn't realize Eretz Yisrael is not like every other country. Eretz Yisrael, b'li Torah, hi kamo guf b'li neshama. Eretz Yisrael without Torah is like a body without a soul. It is the Torah, it is God that sustains a little land surrounded by enemies, surrounded by people who want to annihilate the Jewish people and push us into the ocean. Why? Why don't they do the same about what is it about the land of Israel that they're always about? What do they care if we have one little country smaller than the city of New York? It's teeny Israel. Because there's something about the power of Israel that incites everybody, because they know it's not like other countries. To take out the soul of Israel is to take out what Israel is all about. Eretz Yisrael, Artsein Hakdosh. It's a holy land. It's not like England. It's not like France. It's not like China. It's not like the United States. Israel is God's land, and God gave it to the Jewish people. It says it in Genesis. God gifted it to Abraham, and we are the children of Abraham. That's how it is. So that's what Israel is. And everything about it incites, enrages, empowers, because it is that very special place where God resides in the most revealed form. And this is what happens. I think we're still wandering the desert, ladies and gents. We need Mashiach. We need redemption. We need to get back to Israel.
I was out to dinner a while ago with two people,